O Lord of light, who made the stars, O down by whom we see the way, O Christ, Redeemer of us all, make haste to listen as we pray. In lowliness you came.
Hello, and welcome to Moments with the Master. I am here to talk about the readings for the sixth Sunday of Easter. I am freaking white. The readings are Acts chapter 8, verses 5 through, basically Acts chapter 8, verses 5 through 17, Psalm 66, verses 1 through 5, and verse 18. 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 15 through 18. And then John chapter 14, verses 15 through 21. There was something in Peter. It is better to suffer for doing right, if that should be God's will, than for doing wrong. I agree with that. I'm glad that, sure, everybody's comforted to know that St. Peter meets with my approval. All right, I'm going to read the gospel. Jesus said, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments, and I will pray the Father, and he will give you another counselor to be with you forever, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, for he dwells with you and will be in you. I will not leave you desolate. I will come to you. Yet a little while, and the world will see me no more, but you will see me. Because I live, you will live also. And that day you will know that I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. He who has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him." When I was growing up and my family would sing together, one of the songs that we sang was a Thomas Tallis rendering of that verse. It went, "If ye love me, keep my commandments, and I will pray the Father, and he will send you another comforter, even the Spirit of truth, that he may abide with you forever." Come here, bud. What? Are you just going to meow, or are you going to come sit down? Come here. Okay, he's making a decision. Anyway, so whenever I would sing that song or read that verse, I latched on to the way that it was phrased. "If ye love me, keep my commandments." It's kind of a command. But here it's the same meaning really, but it's changed just ever so slightly to say, "If you love me, you will keep my commandments." Meaning, and this is what I like about it. If we're not keeping the commandments of Jesus, what that means is we don't love him. Because if we did love him, then we would be keeping his commandments. So if we are not keeping his commandments, that is evidence that we don't love him. And then Jesus kind of doubles down on that at the end. "He who has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him and manifest myself to him." Now, of course, God is love and loves all people, but there is a I remember back in the day, there was Josiah told me about one of his teachers, and the teacher was, some of the students would say, "Oh, you play favorites, you play favorites." And this teacher had the best response. She said, "Yeah, the ones who do the lessons and don't make it difficult for me to teach everyone here, they're my favorites. So you can be one of my favorites too. Just do what I ask." Very simple, and interesting to hear Jesus saying it here, because so often you hear, the sun shines on the righteous and the rain falls on the righteous and the unrighteous, and God is love, and God so loved the world, not just the people that obey him. But in this place, Jesus is really spelling out that there is something unique in the relationship between those who obey him and him. And I think that part of that is that, honestly, I just think as we obey him, we are transformed into his likeness. And it is easier or the likeness of God is repaired in us. And it is easier for us to receive that love. But essentially, it just comes down to, and this is something that Father Josh and I have gone over again and again and again. It's not enough just to believe. James says that. It's not enough just to believe. You have to obey. I wrote this very, very, very short story about the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And I renamed them the tree of obedience and the tree of disobedience. And the idea was that in obedience there is life. Jesus obeyed his Father all the way, he humbled himself and obeyed his Father all the way to death, even death on a cross. And then that was latched into to that other legend about the true cross, the cross that Jesus was crucified on, being made from the wood from the tree of life. In this case, it would have been wood from the tree of obedience. There's another story about St. John the Dwarf, where when he first came to the monastery, the abbot said he planted his staff in the ground, and he gave St. John the Dwarf, who was, I guess, just John the Dwarf at that time, gave him a bucket, and he said, go down to the river and bring back one bucket of water and water the staff. And he continued to do that for, I don't know, years. And then one day the staff flowered and grew into a tree and then bore fruit. And the abbot plucked the fruit and he gave it to St. John, and he said, here, take the fruit of obedience. It's an interesting parallel to me from like the biblical story about Aaron's staff, which just flowered miraculously. A lot of times I think that there's an immediacy that is, one second. That there is, oh Lord, I cannot remember where I left off. Oh, there's this expectation of immediacy with a lot of Western, especially evangelical Christianity, where I get saved and I am healed immediately from my drug addiction, or I am healed immediately from the desire to smoke, or I am the staff will flower immediately, or I will immediately be gifted the gift of tongues. I will immediately have a vocation, and there's not work to be done. There's not obedience to be had. It's just this, and we're there. Of course, a little odd for me to be saying this, given that I've been trumpeting Dismas now for weeks and weeks, but I think that for most of us, that should be the expectation, that we need to expect the drudgery, if you will, of obedience. And that's what's going to lead to a dry staff flowering in the desert. Speaking of obedience, just very quickly, I should have, actually, let me look this up real quick. Jewish 10. So there's one of the big things that people talk about when they talk about obedience is the Ten Commandments. And I heard this thing recently that said that when God wrote the Ten Commandments, He didn't write it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on this side and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the other. That it was front and back, and there were two tablets containing all of the commandments. But one of the traditions, one of the legends from Zohar, Judaism, whatever that is that God didn't write on the front and then on the back, but that He wrote through the front into the back. And so that the first commandment on the front was also written as the sixth commandment on the back. It's kind of an ambigram, if you will, but not exactly, not at all really, of where if you look at the first commandment, you also get the sixth one. So I'm using the Jewish list because there's the Jews, the Catholics, and the Protestants all number the commandments differently. So the Jewish first commandment, it's not a commandment, it's a saying, an utterance, words. The first utterance is, I am the Lord thy God who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. And then on the other side, thou shalt not murder. Now, what exactly that means, that's a good question. Like, how are they bound? I would say they are bound. I haven't thought about these yet, but they are bound by the fact that we're made in the image of God. And that when we destroy a human being, we are destroying an image of God. We're iconoclasts, destroying an image that He made of Himself. The second one is, thou shalt have no other gods before me, which would match with thou shalt not commit adultery. That seems to match up right away. There's the idea of fidelity to the other, their fidelity to your spouse, fidelity to your creator. But there's a different relationship that's established later in Christianity where God is very much we are the bride and He is the bridegroom. So God is a jealous God and a jealous husband and father, if you will. It's a little odd to put all those together, but you know what I mean. The third one, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, which would match with the eighth one, thou shalt not steal. I don't know. I'll have to think about that one. The fourth one, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, would match with the ninth, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. I don't know that one either. And then honor thy father and mother, thou shalt not covet anything that belongs to thy neighbor. So I don't know about all of them. I'll have to think about it. Yeah. By the way, Jesus simplified the commandments for us. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And so when He says, if you love me, keep my commandments, the commandments are to love God and love each other. As much as we don't do that, we don't love God. He wrote that command right on through with His finger to the other side. So it kind of makes you think about the unforgivable sin. It might be that the unforgivable sin is as simple as not loving our neighbor, because in as much as we don't love God. Anyway, that's it for me. Let me see what's coming up next week. The seventh Sunday of Easter, and then we're into Pentecost. That next week might be Pentecost. We'll see. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, I give you my heart, my soul, and my strength. Make me a good man.